Hello, everybody. My colleague, Professor Joe Applin, sitting in the front row, and I, Pia Pichler, we are delighted to welcome you to this year's Artist Talk with Acaye Kerunen. Every year, the court holds a sculptural processes group, it's a bit of a mouthful, hosts a sculptor whose work we think is particularly interesting to discuss from the viewpoints of making and meaning, materiality and history. And encountering Acaye's installations at the Venice Biennale and at Frieze in London last year was momentous for myself, but I think it also was an important moment for many other visitors. Acaye presented Uganda, where she was born and lives, at the Biennale alongside Colin Sekayugo, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, resulting in the Ugandan pavilion receiving the Biennale jury special mention for best national participation together with France. This was also Uganda's inaugural participation in the Venice Biennale, which showcased her and Sekayugo's interest in deconstructing Western tropes about Africa and the othering of African art. Acaye's commitment to the radical repositioning of heritage artisanship into the League of Fine Art has led her to be awarded a curatorial fellowship from Newcastle University in 2021, which allowed her to research and realize her biggest solo exhibition to date, titled Iwang Sawa, which is also the title for tonight, in which I know we will be hearing a lot more of. But Acaye has many strings to her bow. She is an installation artist, storyteller, writer, actress, and activist, a multidisciplinary practice for which she prepared by graduating with a BSc in mass communication from Islamic University in Uganda and obtaining a diploma in information systems management from Uptech. Acaye is a prolific writer, with her texts being published both online and in print, for example by Bayimba Productions and Femwrite Uganda. Her poetry and musical theatre, both titled Dawn of the Pearl, premiered in 2006 and were performed at the National Theatre in Uganda and the Phoenix Theatre in Kenya, launching her career as a director, producer, and composer. She's also founding director of K-Book Theatre. Raised by her artist mother, Kerunen's art is rooted in self-realization despite the challenges of everyday life as a mother herself. The maternal values transferred to her are evident in the work ethic, which involves collaborations with women and the reappearance in her own work of some of the tasks that she watched her own mother carry out. Hand-stitching, appending, knotting, and weaving. And in her case, in your case, with plant materials such as banana fiber, palm leaves, sisal, raffia, stripped sorghum stems, and reeds. And I think you're already beginning to understand why we thought your Acaye's work is a fantastic body of work to discuss for us tonight. The process of unmaking and remaking are central to her practice. African women's art making has been confined to utilitarian practices, for example, weaving to produce mats and baskets, rather than weaving for the sake of art making. Acaye collaborates with primary artisans, mostly women, to produce the woven, dyed, and handcrafted materials in her work. Her practice incorporates the many cultures of the Great Lakes region to which Uganda belongs, and the titles of her work are in Alo, Swahili, or Luganda, representing her family background and the women artisans she employs, many of whom speak Uganda. So before I hand over to you directly, to tell us more, I would like to first of all thank our colleagues in the research forum, but specifically Acacia Finbo, for all the help they've given us to make this event happen. And I would then also like to remind you, the audience, that we will be taking questions after Acaye's talk. And then after that, again, we will also welcome you for drinks in the research forum, which is on this floor in this direction. And we would love to see you there, and I hope you will join us. Thank you. So with that, over to you.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Yes, please. So, Acaye, my name means positive pride. It is my first name, the name of my conception, given to me by my mother, was told to me because at the time of my conception, and whilst I was still lounging in her womb, she almost lost me to the vices of gender-based violence from her in-laws, because I was projected to be the sixth girl from her womb at a time when being a second wife to my dad. She was being blamed, one, for being educated, and secondly, for giving birth to too many girls. Tenfold, they're going to end up as prostitutes. I know that the word here is sex workers, but on the other side of the continent, it is prostitutes. So she rose above that. And because she rose above that, she chose, before she even knew me as a manifested being in the physical, she chose that whatever my gender became, I was going to be one whose attributes are positive pride. So the name Acaye is actually gender neutral. And a lot of times people confuse me for a man because they attribute Acaye with a male and. Kerunen is our family name, and it's my dad's name. It means the heirs to the throne or to whatever it is that is good and leadership are manifest. So I'm here. That's done. Now, what does it mean to have a sculptural process? Process is time, the experience of time. It's the experience of time in articulating a word, arriving at an understanding of the meaning of that word, arriving at a comprehension of a diction, or whatever group of words and language mean in a particular geography. It is many things. But in respect to Iwang Sawa, which basically means in the eye of time, what does it mean? It means I'm here, you're here, and we're having this conversation about sculptural processes. For the artisans with whom I collaborate, it means realigning new meaning to old knowledge and new forms of making to older ways of being that have been here before time knew their names, or before the wind knew how to remember how their names sound. What do I mean? Once upon a time, in a land far, far away from here, about 13 hours or so by air, there lived this woman. And this woman was always caught up in, is that me? Come on, work with me. Okay. And this woman was always used and caught up in rituals of function, making, weaving, making food, hosting, and everything. And because she lived at a time when there was no forum such as this to say, I am here, this is how I feel, she learned to rest her mind whilst weaving or knotting or making, so that even the very ritual of food preparation becomes a prayer. And it starts here. are the hands of one of the artisan weavers. The story goes that after 8 years of knowing her, buying her work, and especially her raffia, she finally, on a random day, told me, "But when are you coming to see my home and to see exactly where this raffia comes from? Because I am very sure you do not know." I'm like, "Oh, great! When can I come?" She's like, "You tell me." Okay. So I managed the logistics, and off we went to Mukono, Nkokonjero, which is about 2 hours out of Kampala city. And what I found was a congregation of about 6 women, her primary artisan makers. And she did not at once take me to their habitat for the raffia. She said, "Sit down. I first need to host you properly." So she prepared for me a demonstration of a food making process, which starts with a basket. These are banana leaves, basted, I think the word is basted, over flames, and then arranged in a basket to form a kind of, what do you call it? A pot, so to speak, in which food is steamed. So this becomes like a smart cooker of sorts. But that particular leaf she is placing at the bottom of the banana leaves, whose name skips my mind right now, it was all prepared. But anyhow, that small banana leaf is a prayer. And every time a woman is preparing traditionally in a home, she includes that bit. And it's a daily ritual of sculpting what her relationship in the metaphysical is going to be and how it's going to be manifested. So in the ordinary, it is meant to, that's Georgie, trying to get in, okay. Hi, Georgie.
Hi.
We made it. Yes, you did. So in the ordinary, this particular leaf is just there to make sure that the soup does not leak through. But the symbolism of it is the holding metaphor for a woman in the home, because eventually the man, of course this is always in preparation for the men mostly, is going to eat this food. And she prays every day that his love, his affection will not leak through and be lost. So this is always her prayer. The same banana leaf, the stem, the midrif, is harvested to become the banana rind I talk about in my artistic statements that go into coils to make baskets. The same banana rind is deconstructed to become forms of other things and become other forms of artworks. And she continues here. The same hands. So even in a domestic sphere, there's always a sculpting that happens of food, of process, of time. And she's doing that with one of her sisters-in-law. And sticking out the stripped banana stem, which also features in the basketry. And that is what it becomes before it goes into the fire. The basket is made from a collection of the strips that she's holding, which are dried and then woven over and twined to make this spiral that becomes that basket. And by the way, the basket is always like that because mathematically and traditionally, it is wrong to give or to prepare food or serve food in anything other than a basket that is shaped like this in a round form. I am informed by them that it is in keeping with the philosophy of continuity. Because when a person eats and is gifted or food is prepared, then there is continued nourishment to come. So there is this unspoken about but passed on series of mathematical equations that feature every day in the food and its preparation. And over here is the building process. So what you saw before, a single luombo serves a single person. So as many as the family members are, they are put into a larger saucepan, sculpted around, water added, and set to the fire for anywhere between 5 to 8 hours of slow cooking in the eye of time. So by the time the food is served, it has done its time. And for any obstinate bits of the food, I'll show you an obstinate bit of food. So that is what it becomes at that point. It's a very defiant mouth. Yeah. And they say, all right, then they set it to the fire. And by that time, it has shrunk. It is pliable, it is mashed, and then it is served. And the women collectively in the home gather to make sure that the food is packed right, served right, prepared right, so that it reaches its destination right. You're probably wondering, why is she teaching us all these things? Well, it's all in the process. Because the process is what leads to the water is added. And then all these notes, which is the, I think people are trying to get it, and they're confused. All these notes, which is the banana fiber off the stem. In the background, you see the banana leaves. And on the stems are these banana fibers that when they dry, they become that dark brown. And that is how they use them to tie the food and fasten it and become this precarious mound that ends up being the food that we eat. Where is that food? And because of that, that informed the process of this work called Emigugu, which when I collect the different baskets and commission them, and these are destructured rings and rolls of the matoke plant, which you just saw, which is then woven over with straw and then turned into baskets, and then there are the deconstructed bits. So when I started going and working with the women, they could not understand why I requested them not to turn the rings that they have woven into just rolls. Some of them sent me away and said I was wasting their time. Because as far as they're concerned, time making must result in something functional. So for me to go and say, I don't want a basket, just give me the equivalent of a basket, but which is not turned into a basket. They told me, you're wasting our time. And there was that negotiation that had to happen about how can I be wasting your time when I'm paying you the equivalent and even more for what you would have needed to make the basket. In time, they accepted me. And now they make rings in whatever color I want. And so that becomes this. So the food is the inspiration for this sculpture. Precarious burdens. Just last week, whilst in Uganda, Ibrahim Mahama gave a very lively talk about the precarious gifts that colonialism brought to Africa. We are left with, for instance, old trains that do not function in today's world anymore. And after the initial extraction of goods and everything was done out of Africa, we're left with these empty shells. They're still all right, great metal, all right, but they're not functional anymore. So what do we do with them? For Muhammad's case in Tamale, he turns them into classrooms and installations so that there is a new form of relationship with them. In this case, for me, what I did with the whole idea of precarity of a woman's life, a woman's lived experience, is the constant balancing of disparate themes to who she is as a person in a home, being an intricate part of a home, but never really enough to own space that they can call their own. And every day is a negotiation of pleasing the people that they have to serve through food preparation, through childbearing, through and on top of that, she has to look pretty and act nice and talk sweet and never raise her voice beyond a certain oh. Yeah, and that becomes that. But also when you do come to Kampala, you're going to see a lot of motorcycle people and transporters and bicycle carriers carrying these humongous bits of luggage on potholed streets. And they somehow negotiate these passages and take the luggage home. That's one part. But there's also the part about the clients who trust them to carry this luggage home, as precarious as the balance is along the road, and trust that it will get home. And it's a lot of things of negotiating potholes, of negotiating a system which we inherited from colonialism, but which is not quite working anymore, and seeking new modalities every day. And so as a work, that is the inspiration. Okay. And so it becomes this precarious gift. This work is called Emigugu, made last month. Yeah, and this is another side view of it. I work from home. So because there is an intimacy for me with the work and the timing of when I work, which I cannot quite be satisfied with transferring to a time outside of my home house. And it's comforting. Yeah. So that is just one of the processes. And now I'm going to play you a short fun video in Uganda, and then I'll translate. So this is at the market. So in short, this was in January 2021. Mama Dan and her sculptures of those rings. What she basically told me is, what is going to be easy, for what's easy, my name is Mama Dan. Now what happens with these women is they have been so conditioned with othering that they do not identify themselves by the names with which they were born. So they identify themselves by the names of the children they bear. And that is why she says, my name is Mama Dan. So this was one of my very first meetings with her. She since told me her actual names. It was a negotiation to come to that point of acceptance. So Mama Dan is the one that makes those rings, which appear in this, what she's holding. And when I met her, and I saw that those are stunning, I included one of them in the work that was on your poster. and you can see them deconstructed the bags. And then the scaled up version of it, which I asked her to expand her view. Again, she looked at me and said, why are you wasting my time? What are you going to do with a ring? That, because I can count the number of small rings that go into a bag, I know what it means. Now here you're asking me to make one round ring. How do you want me to charge you? And all these things. So Mama Dan continues for now. Even after her husband has been dead for over 8 years, she still rather identifies herself as the widow of the late and all this time she has been raising her family. She has educated her children. She has done all these things. She's this artist. She's the one who has done this amazing work that ended up somehow in the Biennale but she's still othering her name because time has not yet transformed her mind to come to an acceptance of self. And so, you already saw where her work ended up. It ended up here, and it is also in the Iwang Sawa work. So those are the rings and other things after she scaled it up and expanded her imagination. And yeah, process. But to get from those small rings to that took close to a year. There were processes and months in between when I went to see her, and she just chased me away. And she's like, I don't have what you want. Instead, she would make sure she gives me food to go back home with and say, go and feed yourselves. Yeah. And her work also becomes the middle ring. That was the very first ring she tried out. It was grotesque. It was all these things. And I was so happy when she gave it to me. And because she comes from almost the heartland of Uganda, it became the epicenter of that work as the heart of Uganda, the pulse of Uganda. It's the women, it's their lived experiences, it's their lives of service and what that becomes when we decenter it in a way for good reasons. I know there is a problematic word there with center and decenter, but English is not my first language anyway. So, next is another work. This is Nakate Olivia. This was when I met Nakate Olivia as well, and she finally accepted me to go to her home. That was in late 2020, I think, just when they were starting to open up the economy. And Nakate makes those rings. She's the most intricate and the neatest of my artisan weavers that I work with. But she will tell you your work is not going to be ready in maybe 3 months. And despite what her home looks like, she never accepts money from me until she's done. So I first went into her life, entered her life with this sense of, oh, I'm coming to transform your life. I have some extra money here, take it, I want the work. And she looked at me in that house, in that surrounding, and said, I don't need your money yet. When the work is ready and you're happy with it, you can pay me. So that was actually one of the first works through the fellowship that I started working on. And when you look through the Radiance book, it is Maua, the flower. That was the beginning of the flower. And even after I told her not to join it, she had started turning it into a basket. So there was that process when we argued, and I told her take it apart. It was not a very nice gathered conversation. So in this, yeah. So this was 4 weeks later. After that, when I insisted on giving her a deposit and everything, then she allowed me to go back to check on her, and that was the beginning of Maua. Those are the feet of Ismail. They are the person who takes me wherever I need to go in Uganda. So that was the beginning of the work, when it finally, after she had accepted to follow my vision of where the work should be, and that is where it had begun. But at this point, she also refused to work anymore and chased me away and said I am wasting her time because the amount of work, the meters of coil, of raffia and banana fiber and palm leaves that she'd done here, she told me, was the equivalent of her making 15 little passes. And so she was going on, and I said, okay, so tell me how much it's worth for 15 passes and a little more for your time. And she told me, actually, do not come back. I don't live my life like this in precarity. My time is precious, and. And then, about 8 months later, I received a phone call from her. And she had made these little rings. Now this is the finished work. I've done things to it. She had made these rings, and she didn't know what to do with them because she had made them as coasters for the table, so she sells them as sets. And then she calls me and goes, I'm very shy, and says, I've done something new. I don't know if you will accept them. And of course, I had to hide my smile of, gotcha! Yes, yeah. So, yes, so we've been working on those, and that is featuring in one of the new works I've been working on since January. Where is the other bit of the work? Oh, and the other work from previous lady, Mama Dan, ended up in one lay. That was whilst I was just making it at Afropocene in Kampala before it went to the Biennale. And where is the other work? Which story do I want to tell right now? Okay. And over here are palms that are being transported after they've just been harvested. This is in Kokonjeru with Gertrude, who invited me finally to her home 8 years after I had been buying raffia from her. So it's within the same habitat that you see the raffia, the palms and everything. This is another very hardy material called the njuru. Njuru comes from this plant over here. There. I think you have variations of this here somewhere. So when the stems are stripped, it's a very hardy material that is used to twine. And it's very hardy to the extent that even ants and things do not easily eat it. It stays for years and years. This woman over here is, or was supposed to be, her co-wife. Gertrude has supplied me all the work that I do is threaded with the raffia that comes from one source who is Gertrude all these years. And after she kept wondering, why do you keep buying all this raffia all this time, and seeing me in the market for all, that is when she took me to her home. The lady from the previous slide is supposed to be her co-wife, and I didn't know. So when she takes me to her home, we're going around, and this lady sitting in the back seat is just kind of accepting everything that Gertrude is saying and going, oh, yes, yes, yes. So when she gets off, I asked Gertrude, who is that woman? Then she laughs and she goes, that is supposed to be my co-wife. I came into her home as a second wife, and I decided that there is no point in us being enemies because there is nothing to fight for. And I'm like, okay, right. It's like, yes. She continued and she said, because you know, the thing that we should have been fighting for is dead. Their husband is dead. So when he died, she moved out of the house in which they lived together on either side with a middle room, and he used to go from one end to the next when it suited him. And since he left land, she moved out, and with money from her craft making and selling, she built her own house within the same compound. And they're so close because she said, look, our children are the same. They are in each other's homes, and it is important that they grow up knowing that they are brother and sister. And besides, we are old and getting, she's not that old, but she thinks she's old. And at this juncture, therefore, I'm speaking like a typical Ugandan. At this juncture, therefore, I would like to invite us all, now that the room is settled, to sit up straight, for starters. The other thing about the sculptural process is finding our connecting thread, a connecting voice, a connecting sound. And being that I'm in a different geography, I'm curious to know what the tonal quality of this room is. So I'm going to invite you to journey with me, and let's go. I can't hear you. Let's go. Let's join the notes. Okay, let's start. Let's assume that we're somewhere in Uganda where it's sunny and it is 24 degrees or something, and you need to move. Let's start up. Come. So, let's go. One more time. One last time. Beautiful. I had a new melody. Let's go. One more time. that leads me, you can take your seats. That leads me to this. So after collecting all the work and everything, being that I love storytelling, there are also so many stories that cannot be put to words. So they become, yes, an installation, but also a sound. Was installed in Venice. The story of Cotobino is rain, beautiful rain and water, tears of ecstasy, tears of joy, sweat, gushing water, orgasms, the thought of them and the absence of them. And Cotobino, which was then installed in Venice, is about that, rain. And Cotobino, translated literally, means that the rain has come. And it's a culmination of so many things, of so many stories shared and testimonies whilst working with the women that come up, that to share would be to do a disservice to their stories, but to turn it into a monument becomes something beautiful. And finally, before you all start to fall asleep, and I'm smelling coffee, and it says nothing about my mobility. This was meal, dance, whilst still at Afro Hossein. It changed and morphed into other things. But yeah, that was part of the process of its making, and it has materials from all over Uganda. So recently, as I conclude, I was talking to another friend of mine, and the other thing that I'm passionate about is heritage sites and spaces. So he invites me for a drink and tells me, you know, you need to come to Acaye. Acaye is in northern Uganda towards Karamoja, the Karamoja and Kidepo region. It's a semi-arid area, and it's mostly dry, but part of it is a landscape spanning over 1,000 hectares on which are naturally occurring shea nut trees. Shea nut trees, which are called yao, are sacred trees in that part of Uganda. They are never cut, and they are a community resource. It means that wherever they occur, the community builds around it or beside it. They don't cut it, they leave the tree to grow. But also it means that whoever goes into this compound or this space and finds that the fruits already can harvest without needing to ask permission. Because the philosophy is, you found them here. You do not have a say or a part in how it got planted. Therefore, it belongs to no one, wherever it may occur. Because of this, the Lira region also was very struck by the Corn War at the time when it was. So a lot of people fled, and a large mass of this land was turned into an internally displaced people's camp. So around the early 2000s, this friend of mine, his name is Ojoko Kelo, returned to reclaim his land, otherwise it was going to be taken. And so we were seated talking, and he was telling me, what do we do? I have this space, come and do some artistic project here and everything. And I told him, what do you want me to do? And he said, maybe come and direct a play. I said, no, that's kind of redundant. And so we kept talking, and somehow the conversation went back to memory. And I asked him, I said, what do you tell your sons about your experience of the war? Because now you're a parent. And he goes, actually, I cannot have that conversation with my son because he has no concept of the war. It's not even something he can relate to. So every time I tell him there used to be war and unrest here, he does not understand. So I don't have that conversation. And then we keep on talking, and then he just says, oh, by the way, even if the shea nut trees are not cut, there is this tree that was struck by lightning and fell. When it fell, it revealed a wound. The wound was the site of an RPG head that was fired in the late 90s, whilst the war was still raging, and ended up in this tree. And the tree grew around it. Lo and behold, lightning comes and strikes just that tree, and it dies and falls. So it was there, and because they found an RPG in it, the community could not bring themselves to harvest it, even if it is fallen for firewood or any other thing, because they still that respect that death occurred on this tree. And because of that, and because it is a sacred tree, I'm told that even at the height of the war, Kon himself and the rebels could never kill someone under a shea nut tree or on a shea nut tree. So when people were running, they always sought refuge beneath the shea nut tree or within a shea nut tree, because it is believed that when you commit any kind of bloodshed around, beneath, or on a shea nut tree, you will run mad or bad omens will come at you. So it became a site of refuge. Now, I see here that there is a lot of buildings and built heritage sites that house artwork and the history of artwork and. When you come home, and by home I mean Uganda, when you do come home, our histories, our heritage are not kept in buildings. They're kept on the land, in trees, in the community and in collective memories. They are also kept within the weaving patterns that you see in the mats and in the baskets. They are kept in these sounds. This sound that we just workshopped, you're going to find it a lot when you come home, especially within the communities. You'll find it in songs. It is a call to cohere, to togetherness. And that is why somehow a melody emerged, because it's tied to the metaphysics of our being. So when we talk about sculptural processes, you'll hardly find me doing work, and sometimes I sketch, yes, but rarely. I feel it. When it stands, the picture that I showed before of me sitting beneath the work was the point when the work stands on its own, because those are heavy materials. When it's able to stand on its own before my eyes without falling or balancing off, I know the work is ready. Then I start to fine tune it. So in terms of my process of sculpting, it's very thematic. It's a very felt experience that happens. Back to Okere. So I made sure, since it was okay, we emerged, got the guys, we went and harvested the tree, took it back to the compound, and reinstalled it. Took off the excess beads, the back and everything, and what remained is the scale. And then we dug a hole, come on, yes, and reinstalled it on site within Okere. And the one standing at the back is one of the artisans and also the sculptors, the lead sculptors of Okere City, which is in Lira, and that is them standing the tree. And that is what it becomes. So what's happening with this tree as a sculptural process, because it is emblematic of a lot of memory that has gone silent and needs words. I did a storytelling session that night with some of the guys that transferred the tree, and asked them to share their memory of the war, of not just the war, but of the names of people who were lost to the war that they did not feel comfortable to share before. And from this tiny group, over 37 names emerged of people who were lost, who disappeared, who died, who were decapitated, and all these things. And the conversation was, we're saying these names, but we are awakening the spirits of the dead who have not yet rested. So what is happening is there is an ongoing activity that's happening right now that I asked to continue, where the community is gathering the names of other people who are lost. And we're going to inscribe them on the tree, and also find other bits of wood fallen off sheer nut trees, because in as much as that is sacred ground in terms of the sacred trees that are there, a lot of pain and suffering also happened, and there was not a dignified passage for most of the people whose blood was shed on that land. And so within this year is to make sure that the beginning of this sacred space, this collection point of memory from the community happens, where we shall again gather around the tree and congregate and speak their names with dignity and send them off back into the universe to find a peaceful journey into the other life. And that's me with other roles during the run-up to the Biennale, when I did the workshop at UNCC, when I collected the women and was demonstrating to them what the roles can become. And that was us transferring the beginning of the work. This was the first collective work that we did together. It was a hectic day, very hectic, with over 35 women leaders. And these here are the rings that come out of, yes. And as you may notice, This is Nankabira's co-wife, or her sister. That is her work. And I find it extremely inspiring that when you look at her, you would never consider her a professor of mathematics. And yet the mathematics is in her fingers. That's her work. That is the mathematical matrices that she weaves. And that is how she looks. So in terms of sculpting, I work with and I'm learning from very ordinary artisans with extraordinary minds and experiences. And hopefully that work and the transformation, the cross-pollination, I hope I become as clever as they are. One day I'll become a doctor like you. something, yeah? Yes, I think I've talked a lot. I hope you're not bored. I didn't hear anyone snoring, so I'm safe. And yeah, that was the word from the RPG. And when the lightning struck, it set it on fire, which is kind of symbolic, isn't it? Yeah. And the gaping ball remained. So it is finding modes and ways to reinstitute memory in a dignified way. It's finding balance in a very precarious set of themes and disparities. It is weaving new languages for education, because the education that we were given and which supplanted what was there before is not the education that we need right now in Africa or the learning. And slowly, hopefully that changes, because in as much as we do not have a documented history in the ways that you're so good here at documenting, it's there, it's just less visible. So the task at hand is to realign that documentation, translate where we can with dignity and honor, and hopefully instigate conversations like this from the work. So in many ways, life goal number 1, check, done. Okay, I'm done. Please clap for me so I can